Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to News Globe. This is Laraib Shahid. आज we're going to discuss about two things. Number one, Yom Takbir, which is when Pakistan detonated its nuclear weapons back in 1998. उस चीज का इस मुल्क को क्या फायदा हुआ? Who was involved? What was the background story? What was the reaction from the entire world? We're going to discuss about that, but also we're going to discuss about democracy. कि जमहूरियत क्या है? What is democracy? We hear about democracy, we talk about democracy, but do we really know what democracy is? So we're going to discuss about all of that. Please stay tuned. थैंक यू हसन फॉर जॉइनिंग अस। जैसे कि आज की डेट में 28 में पूरे पाकिस्तान में जो है वो योम तकबीर मनाया जा रहा है, विच इज़ व्हेन पाकिस्तान टेस्टेड इट्स न्यूक्लियर कैपेबिलिटी बैक इन 1998। उसमें बहुत सी चीज़ें इन्वॉल्व थी, द बैकग्राउंड स्टोरी ऑफ इट, द इंटरनेशनल लॉ इन्वॉल्व एट दैट टाइम, द रिएक्शन फ्रॉम द इंटायर वर्ल्ड, how Pakistan possessed those materials needed for it, and was there only one person behind it? या वो एक बहुत, इट्स अ लाइक बिग बैकग्राउंड स्टोरी बिहाइंड इट। तो आप उसको हमारे लिए समराइज कर दें, जस्ट सो वी अंडरस्टैंड हाउ इट ऑल हैपेंड।
Thank you, Larry, for having me. And most importantly, I think the fact that we, despite being a country of the global south, were able to develop nuclear weapons in itself is a huge achievement because it took us more than around 2.5 decades to get to that capability where we were able to do a kind of a cold test. Coming back to the environment in which all of this was being done, ये post World War II environment है। आपको याद रखना चाहिए कि 1974 के अंदर पहली दफा India detonated its nuclear device, which was called the Smiling Buddha at that time, Wakhan 1 जो test थे। It was Indira Gandhi who was at the helm of affairs in India, and at that time it was Zulfikar Bhutto was the prime minister in Pakistan who actually said famously that we'll eat grass but still go on to build the bomb. Yeah. But that actually went on to define in many ways the kind of work and effort and the relentless pursuit, for that matter, of the technology that was done by a lot of people. It was not done by just one particular person. I think this is one of those national causes for which our politicians, diplomats, scientists, military men, all of them have contributed equally to achieve that success for that matter. So it's a huge success. उसके अलावा अगर आप देखते हैं, so the world at that time, World War II के बाद एक हमें नजर ये आया कि after Hiroshima, Nagasaki, there was rightly so बहुत ज्यादा एक टेक्नोलॉजी पे अबॉरेंट समझा गया, न्यूक्लियर वेपन्स पे अबॉरेंट समझा गया। बट हमारे यहाँ हमें अंडरस्टैंड करना है दैट पाकिस्तान वाज फोर्स्ड टू गो न्यूक्लियर। वी हैड नो इंटेंशन ऑफ क्रिएटिंग अ न्यूक्लियर वेपन प्रोग्राम, but we were left with no other option because of the enemy that we had, or for that matter, the nation that we have as a neighbor, India, that started the whole process. And in between, we gave India a number of opportunities, diplomatic opportunities, to make South Asia a nuclear-free zone, which they didn't take. So from 74 onward, बहुत diplomatic discussions going that South Asia can be a nuclear-free zone, but India declined on that. Other than that, अगर आप international law में देखते हैं तो जो उसमें nuclear non-proliferation treaty है, enacted 1870, उसके अंदर हमें नजर ये आता है जाके that आपने you actually went on to say that there are 5 countries, which is one of the most discriminatory international treaties that exist, by the way, which goes on to say that there are 5 treaties that shall be treated as the jure nuclear weapon states, जो हमें पता है जाके यूएस, यूके, रशिया, फ्रांस, चाइना। इसके अलावा अगर कोई और बनाएगा, so that would be something that would be recognized by the NPT itself. उसमें फिर इंडिया ने बनाया, we were forced to do it, and then पाकिस्तान, उसके बाद में भी Israel also has the capability. So there is a lot that can be said about this capability, for that matter. A lot of people have contributed a lot. If we want to do a whole session, we can go on into that, for that matter. But if you have any specific questions, please let me know.
Okay, let's just keep it very precise. हसन भाई, देखा जाए तो पॉलिटिकल स्पेक्ट्रम में पाकिस्तान के पीएम जो है नवाज शरीफ, वो इसका बहुत क्रेडिट देते हैं, बट आपने जितना भी मेंशन किया It wasn't just one person or one party. It was the entire Pakistan, the entire Pakistani political elite, institutions of the state, and everybody was involved equally. किस हद तक ये बात ठीक है कि लोग या वो एक स्पेसिफिक पॉलिटिकल पार्टी जो है वो खुद क्रेडिट ले इस बात पे?
I think where Nawaz Sharif should and be given credit is where the detonation of nuclear weapons is concerned. जब
हम्म
आपने detonate किया 1998 के अंदर, उस टाइम पे हमें याद रखना चाहिए कि the Prime Minister when India ने detonate किया mid May of 1998, he was actually visiting Central Asia republics at that time, and हमारे foreign secretary थे Shahid Khan, and he actually told him, and then he came back to Pakistan, and the first thing he came after coming back to Pakistan was that he instructed Dr. Saman Mubarak Band that we should actually be preparing for a nuclear test of our own detonation ka. And that is where the credit is due, because he could have actually gone ahead and accepted a lot many deals that were coming in from Europe, from the United States, and even President Bill Clinton personally reached out to him multiple times, by the way, to offer pledges of billions of dollars. जो जाके, and Bill Clinton actually goes on to write in his own book that if I were in his place, I would have done the same. So detonation of weapons on 28th of May 1998 is where Nawaz Sharif deserves credit, because the उस जमाने में जो हमारी डिफेंस कमेटी होती थी, कैबिनेट कमेटी, उसमें भी जो इवेंचुअल डिसीजन था वो आर्मी चीफ जहांगीर करामत, they all decided that eventually whatever the prime minister would decide would be the decision that would be taken. So I think वो था. But उसके अलावा, if you look at the way in which it was continued for that matter, starting from the time in 1974, Zulfikar Ali Bhutto hai, Dr. Munir Ahmed Khan is the Atomic Energy Commission. We then see a number of personalities emerging for that matter, continued all the way, even the 90s में बहुत political turmoil भी था, तब भी it continued. So I think every party has played a huge role in the development, and it was something of a sacred mission that every political party one way took on and continued.
ठीक, तो जब ये डेवलपमेंट हो रही थी न्यूक्लियर वेपन्स की, इंटेलिजेंस जो थी उसको, जिसमें आपने कहा इट वाज अ सीक्रेट मिशन, तो the world intelligence, उनको they weren't informed at all about any such development in Pakistan.
I think this is wrong to say कि पता नहीं था, पता था. I think उनके साथ Brezhnev went on to actually say it very clearly, who was the US Secretary of State, that if we have to support the Soviets in Afghanistan, one of the costs that we would have to pay is that Pakistan would gain access to nuclear weapons. The international agencies, but this does not mean they were supportive of it. They tried their level best to one way or the other cut our sources, the sources थी हमारे जो और बहुत सी sanctions लगी, फिर Pressler amendment आ गई, तो उन्होंने कोशिश बहुत की इस पे, there is no doubt about it. But to say that they were unaware is incorrect. ठीक है, जब हमने कोल टेस्ट वगैरह किया, वो डेट शायद आगे पीछे जरूर है, but they were very fully aware of it, and उनको ये भी पता था that सोवियत यूनियन को अगर हराना है अफगानिस्तान में, so we'll have to turn a blind eye towards the Pakistan's nuclear weapon program, and this happened. But it was also at the same time the case that they, after 1980s, जब when the Russians came back from the Oxus River, तो हमने नजर ये आता है कि they tried a lot of them, US sanctions आती हैं, international sanctions आती हैं, but by then it was too late. And I think our politicians and leaders nationally put their ground.
ठीक. और अगर हमारे पास न्यूक्लियर वेपन्स ना होते, तो वो जिसमें बोलते हैं कि हमें इंडिया खा जाता,
ये बात, दिस इज एक्चुअली करेक्ट फॉर मेनी इंस्टेंसेस. एक तो आपको याद रखना चाहिए कि जब इंडिया ने अपने न्यूक्लियर वेपन्स डेटोनेट किए थे, Advani, who was then the deputy prime minister in India, he said very rhetorically, and he went on TV, national television back in the day, and he went ahead and said that Pakistan would have to give up its claim on Kashmir and also on Bharat. But then his own prime minister, जब हमने कर लिए, उसके बाद he came to Lahore. He said Pakistan is I'm talking about Vajpayee. he came to Lahore and accepted that Pakistan is a reality that we must live with, and we accept it as a state. So I think वो तो एक बात है. अब अगर आप recent clashes देखें, the way in which India के अंदर जो rhetoric चल रहा है, war rhetoric जिस तरीके से, for example, जो नरेंद्र मोदी और उसके अमित शाह and Rajnath Singh and all these people, what they have been trying to do of late is to incite violence against Pakistan and the people of Pakistan. The recent statement of the Prime Minister of India stating that either you can get food or, for that matter, bullets from us, goes on to show the personalized threats that are now emerging. And the recent escalation that we saw between India and Pakistan, usme bhi jo, the reason that India was unable to achieve much at the end of the day was that the deterrence actually went on to play a very important role. So, no doubt, looking at India today, that if it was within the ambit of Indians' decision-making power, और हमारे पास we would have not developed nuclear weapon, तो कोई guarantees नहीं होती हमारे पास आज, and probably the statehood in itself would have been better.
ठीक ठीक. Also, I also wanted to touch upon the issue of declining democracy around the world. ये हमने अक्सर काफी दफा इस चीज पे बहस और मुबाहिसा भी किया कि कितना जरूरी है डेमोक्रेसी का होना, प्रेवलेंस होना जमहूरियत की एक मुल्क में. इंटरनेशनली हमारे जैसे मुल्कों में देखा जाए तो ऑफ कोर्स बहुत से सवालात हैं डेमोक्रेसी को लेके, लेकिन एज ऑफ लेट जब हम इंटरनेशनली देखा जाए तो there's a rise of right wing. Now I wouldn't go on to say that right wing is undemocratic. Of course they're not, but they sort of present extremist views and not so liberal views that democracy demands throughout the Europe as well as the USA. Wherever we see there's this rise of right-wing politics. Donald Trump USA में, इटली में आप देख लें, the Netherlands में आप देख लें. What is going on in the world? Are we going back towards authoritarianism?
Sadly, the news for those who believed in constitutional protections, who believed in human rights, who believed in the idea of democracy in itself, is that democracy is not only receding, it has recessed to the point that it is already in recession. There's a decline in democracy globally because democracy hai kya? I think it's very important for us to remember and understand what a democracy is to begin with. Democracy, for that matter, is not just about elections. Democracy, at the end of the day, is that there are certain fundamental rights that I have, irrespective of my identity, irrespective of any ethnicity that I might belong to, any ethnic that I might belong to. I would continue to enjoy those rights. And these debates go back to the canonic thinkers of बहुत पुराने हैं. But one thing was made very clear, that constitutional democracy at the end of the day would continue to give people their fundamental freedoms, जिनको Aristotle Goods कहता है. John Stuart Mill free speech पे लिखता है जाके, और अभी we get to know private property पे Locke और Adam Smith बात करते हैं. So it was not just about elections. This is where it need to be made clear, because अगर आप सिर्फ elections को देखते हैं, that would mean democracy is an equivalent of majoritarianism. Because elections, eventually, whatever the majority goes on to decide, that goes on to happen. Majoritarianism in itself is not the only component of democracy. It is a very sacred, important component, but there are other components that need to be there. Are we going back? I think we are. Protectionism is back. Tariffs की हम बात करते हैं. US is tariff to that matter to other countries. We are now going back to early before World War I era. And it's an era that led to the greatest war of all time. So it's not something to be, in one way or the other, something that we can actually go on to accept. It is something to be very worried about. But is it something that we didn't know? The social sciences में हमें पता नहीं हमें पता था. I mean, people have been warning us about Larry Diamond. If you look at his literature, if you look at other people around who have written about democracy, they were actually warning us since very long. Democracy would eventually decline because it's not probably it's not delivering for the masses, and based the reasons and जिसमें हम जा सकते.
ठीक. एक और जो इसकी साइड है, द राइज ऑफ राइट विंग एंड डेमोक्रेटिक वैल्यूज के जो एक डिमिनिश हो रही हैं अराउंड द वर्ल्ड, There's one thing which is very worrisome for a lot of people, especially from our countries, which is immigration. Now we see around the world, especially the Western countries, they're closing their borders, they're tightening their migrant rules for their countries. Um, आपको क्या लगता है आज से 10 साल बाद would there be less to no immigration at all?
So there are two questions. One is related to the immigration, and the other is about the rise of right wing parties.
Yeah.
देखिए right wing promise क्या कह रहा है, या for example populism आपको promise क्या कह रहा है? What populism is actually going on to is actually promising people, or goes on to promise people, is that there was once an ancient past that in which the state to which you belong was great. Look at the kind of slogans that President Trump uses, "Make America Great Again."
Yeah.
So they're actually referring to a primordial past. Whether that primordial past exists or not is something up for debate. But actually trying people to get back to those values that existed like centuries ago. तो वहां पे तो उस टाइम पे immigration कम थी, तो उस टाइम पे obviously immigration नहीं थे जाके. So one that is very much part and parcel of the right wing message that we go on to see being delivered by Trump in US, Le Pen in France. We see that rising with the UK and the UKIP के पार्ट के साथ हमें नजर आता है बहुत. So the right wing populism and immigration are actually to a large extent linked with each other. जो मल्टीकल्चरल टेंडेंसीज थी, या जो दुनिया में ये एक 2000 के अराउंड या 2000 अर्ली 2000 तक ये बिलीव था कि देयर इज अ नीड फॉर इंटीग्रेशन ऑफ पीपल. आई डू नॉट नीड टू गिव अप ऑन माय आइडेंटिटी इन ऑर्डर टू लिव इन अ वेस्टर्न वर्ल्ड. उसकी जो लेट्स से उसकी अब वैल्यू उतनी नहीं. वो जो वेलकमलका ने उसका मल्टीकल्चरलिज्म को डिफाइन किया था कि ये एक मेल्टिंग पॉट होगा, वो melting pot nahi raha. We have to understand that the West is now also trying to go back to what they used to stand for, which is racism, which is the burden of civilization, which is standard of civilization के जो myths थी जिसको बाद में decolonization के बाद bust कर दिया गया कि कोई ऐसी चीज नहीं थी. बट वो आज अब दोबारा उसमें वाइट सुप्रीमेसी वगैरह में जाने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं. उसके ऑब्वियसली इम्पैक्ट होगा. आई थिंक इमिग्रेशन के चांसेस ऑलरेडी कम हैं बिकॉज ऑफ अ लॉट ऑफ अदर रीजंस, और ज्यादा कम होते जाएंगे बिकॉज द सोसाइटीज जनरली आर बिकमिंग लेस टॉलरेबल ऑफ पीपल हु इन एनी वे डू नॉट लुक लाइक दैट.
ठीक. और उसी को if I continue it further, as you said, they're closing their borders, there's white supremacy, there's less of the value of integration now, and more what they are demanding as of now is assimilation but not integration. So usme of course there's this superiority of one culture over the other in their minds, or in people's minds, as we say. Because a lot of Pakistanis hold their culture superior to other cultures, so it's across the globe. So do you see there's going to be a clash of civilization, because there's a lot of anti-Muslim rhetoric around the world, especially with conflicts going on in the Middle East? Do you really see there is a clash of civilization happening really very soon?
I think the clash of civilization arguments is an argument that came in the aftermath of the end of the Cold War. जब फुकुयामा ने कहा था कि history has come to an end, and Francis Fukuyama responded, no, there would be further clashes in terms of identity. और उसमें clash of civilization की बात होती है. देखिए जो फुकुयामा का आर्गुमेंट है उससे तो अग्री करना मुश्किल है for various reasons. One of the most important reasons for that is that he goes on to look upon Islam as a civilization, when Islam in itself is a religion, it's not a civilization. I mean, a person who's a Muslim living in Malaysia and is a Malay has very less in common with a person who's an Arab and lives somewhere in Middle East, or a Jordanian for that matter, other than the fact that he's Muslim. And the fact that there is some kind of an ummah out there, I think nation states के साथ ही resonate. But civilizational conflict to the extent जो diasporas के अंदर, देखिए एक वो लोग जो वहाँ चले गए, वहाँ रह गए हैं, they should have integrated or assimilated, वो एक अलग debate है. But diaspora politics बहुत different होती है from the clash of civilization that we are talking about. Is there a group of Islamic countries going after a group of Western countries? ऐसा नहीं.
हम्म।
सो ये अंडरस्टैंड करनी, कोई कन्फ्यूशन चाइना जो है वो एंटी वेस्टर्न हो गया है जाके, तो देख वो तो ट्रेड करना चाहते हैं, वो तो आपसे
या।
बिजनेस करना चाहते हैं। तो
हम्म।
डायस्पोरा पॉलिटिक्स शुड नॉट बी मिक्स्ड विद द क्लैश ऑफ सिविलाइजेशन। डायस्पोराज में हमेशा ये होता है, जहाँ भी आप माइनॉरिटी कम्युनिटी होते हो तो आप रीइटरेट करते हो अपनी
हम्म।
आइडेंटिटी, because you are being felt to become, or you're being made to become relatively inferior to others. और आपके ऊपर एक ये प्रेशर रहता है कि आप अपनी आइडेंटिटी को लूज ना कर दो। हमारे यहाँ जो लोग 70s और 80s में सब कॉन्टिनेंट से गए थे, तो आज भी वो ट्रेडिशन बिलीव करते हैं जाके, शायद ये पाकिस्तान में भी अब आउटडेटेड है। डायस्पोरस के लिए प्रॉब्लम्स होंगे, बिकॉज
हम्म।
आई थिंक बिकॉज हमने पहले ही कह दिया, आई थिंक वेरी इन द वेरी बिगिनिंग वी सेड दैट डेमोक्रेसी एज वी अंडरस्टैंड इज, फॉर एग्जाम्पल इन टर्म्स ऑफ द प्रोटेक्शन ऑफ राइट्स, वो डिक्लाइन में है, वो खत्म हो रही है। कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल प्रोटेक्शन यूएस में आप देख लीजिए, कोर्ट्स ने कुछ ऐसी जजमेंट्स दी हैं जिसमें हमें नजर आ रहा है कि वहाँ भी रिस्पेक्ट फॉर माइनॉरिटी राइट्स काम हो रही है। तो जब ग्लोबली ये ट्रेंड्स होंगे तो उसमें फिर डायस्पोरास वुड हैव टू आइदर assimilate as you rightly pointed out, or probably leave and get back to where their parents were. But eventually I think we are sadly moving back.
मेरा पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू ये है इस चीज को लेके, बिकॉज I've got a lot of exposure to the Western world as well. और मैं ये देखती हूँ काफी हद तक ये होता है, कि जब हमारे मुल्कों से लोग यहाँ पे आते हैं, they are not willing to integrate at all. And of course आप ये देखें ना कि अगर पाकिस्तान में बाहर से लोग आ रहे हैं, टोटली डिफरेंट कल्चर से लोग आ रहे हैं, एंड दे आर मेंटेनिंग देयर cultural values in Pakistan, their own living style in Pakistan, and they're like 10%, 15% of the total population of Pakistan. So of course Pakistanis would be worried about that. Slowly the culture of Pakistan, the base culture of Pakistan is going to dilute, और वहां से फिर problems create होंगे, unless they are willing, the people who are coming from foreign countries into Pakistan are willing to integrate to some extent into our culture. So I think it's only right that if you are living or going into another country, you're willing to integrate into their values, their culture as well. Doesn't mean you have to leave your own culture or your own values, but it's just a little tolerance is required. Whereas a lot of times problems दोनों जगह से हैं. The host countries, they require assimilation, they demand assimilation. At the same time, the immigrants, they are not willing to integrate at all. So I think it's all about tolerance, the level of tolerance from both sides, and this is how we can become a very tolerant society, a multicultural society. But unfortunately, I don't think this is going to happen now. What's going to happen is closed borders, their own cultures, hatred towards other culture, and specifically hatred towards other religion. And unfortunately, it's also a part of the rise of right wing and the decline of democracy. I think all of these things are interlinked, and all of these problems are not in isolation. They all are interlinked very much. So yeah, unfortunately, this is the reality we live in, and this is how we're going to be. This is how it's going to be.
Completely concur, Laraib. I think that is exactly what is happening, as you just pointed out. And by the way, what you're suggesting that for that with integration as a solution is something that I completely agree with. Even if you talk, when you refer to Pakistan for that matter, Pakistan में you do not tolerate even people जो थोड़े से भी आपसे different है, चाहे वो
Yeah.
पाकिस्तानी के know. So when you go to a country abroad, you have to respect all of the traditions that are over
Mhm.
there. You cannot just go on to completely go on with the culture that we brought in. आपको कुछ उनकी values और कुछ अपनी values का exchange करते हैं. Eventually, every culture has good and bad things and good and bad values. But with that being said, I think we also have to understand the economic dimensions of it. ये
Hmm.
नहीं हो सकता कि तो हम देख रहे हैं कि protectionism आ रहा है and borders are being closed and all. But we have to understand that economic demands would only be met if there would be migrant force coming in from the global south into the global north.
Hmm.
So capitalism has in itself certain forces that might not actually allow for that much of a closed society as some people of the right wing actually want to do. And a lot of liberals and others realize that because they understand the interconnectedness of the world in which we live today. Even if you go on to close your doors, you would still be open to a number of other experiences of other cultures. And more importantly, you need these migrants in order to survive in today's economy. So I think economic pressures eventually would persuade political leaders and even public opinions to
Hmm.
one way or the other make case for migrants for that.
बिल्कुल बिल्कुल एंड ऑल्सो अगर देखा जाए तो बर्थ रेट इज the biggest problem I think for the Western nations. Their birth rate is declining so fast, and they need people, they need workforce in their own countries to keep their economy going. So yeah, it's not that they're going to close their borders for everyone, but I think what's going to happen is more selective immigration, a more controlled immigration, I would say. Uh, but at the same time, yeah, there are going to be a lot of cultural problems within the Western nations. I don't see it's going to work out as we used to think back in the days, like 2 decades ago, जब हम सोचते थे ये बात कि oh, it's a melting pot, it's multiculturalism is great and everything. I don't see that's happening, and unfortunately, we'll have to see. Let's say 10 साल बाद के क्या होता है, क्या situation होती है. But to be fair, I'm not very optimistic about what's going to happen next.
I mean, the way things are, you don't even know what is going to happen next very week. हम तो नहीं सोच रहे थे कि escalation
बिल्कुल.
होगी इंडिया. So I mean, and with climate change and a lot many
Yeah.
other different places, we cannot predict any years. But yes, I think looking at the trends that exist today, I think democracy seems like a value of the past, which is a very, which is something that we all go on to regret, because at the end of the day, it is a system that, if put to use efficiently, can deliver very well for the people. But it's not being put to use well by the politicians, and then there are also non-state actors that go on to indulge into politics. So these are issues that need to be tackled head on, but I don't think that is a priority in a
Yeah.
lot of societies.
बिल्कुल बिल्कुल. I agree. Thank you so much, Hassan Bhai, for your time.